there was people that were in my life that I knew had served in the military, and every single one of them was somebody that I looked up to, in one way or another. So I made the jump quite literally. That was one of the things. They're like, you got to be airborne. And it was that facing the fear of heights. I was terrified of heights always, but it was that means to an end. So, and doing hard things and going through and building either that resistance or that, hey, you know what? Like, you have to trust the people in charge. You have to trust the people around you that they've done this. They know that path. They've got you. They're not going to do you wrong. And that was proven. Airborne School was at the end, it was a thing, but it was just that. It was like, wow, there's some element of danger and stuff, but in trusting your equipment and trusting the people around you, it's just another hurdle to get through.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Hale, and this is Point of Impact. I've often wondered, what does it take to write a good war story? And I'm not talking about the kind of story you tell your buddies over a pint at the bar. I'm talking about a military historical book. There's a tough balance there. Well, you've got to be historically accurate, and time doesn't dissipate the fog of war. It only makes it more opaque. And you ask 10 soldiers, and you'll get 10 different accounts of the same event. So being correct is a challenge all on its own. But then, how do you tell a good story without sensationalizing or over-embellishing, making cartoons or super soldiers of these war fighters? It's a challenge. You got to pay the proper respect while telling the story, being accurate, giving character and personality to these warriors, honoring the sacrifice, the service of the wounded, the fallen, the families. It becomes a historical reference, a tribute. It becomes part of legacy. William Yeske was a paratrooper with the 1st Platoon, Bravo Company, 2nd, 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment. And he got the blessing of his regiment, Big Green Army, and most importantly, his platoon, to put pen to paper and tell the story of a unit that at one time in 2010 filled the entire prosthetics department at Walter Reed Medical Center. And more specifically, he tells the story in his book, Damn the Valley, about his platoon on deployment in 2009-2010 to the Argadab River Valley in Afghanistan. A place I'm well familiar with since I was just down the road 1 year later on my own deployment. I can very much picture the events depicted in this book, and in my opinion, I think Will has done a fantastic job of being historically accurate while also paying the proper respect and giving the story the gravity that it really deserves. War brings out the absolute worst in human nature, man, at its very ugliest. But it also brings out some things that are actually pretty beautiful. Man at its very best. We need these extremes as emotions, and it's got to be an awfully difficult challenge to be able to put that accurately in a story and tell it in a way that's compelling. And it will become historical reference, an homage, honor to a generation. When our grandkids want to know what Grandpa did in the war, they've got what their parents have told them, and they'll have our books. And stories like Band of Brothers and We Were Soldiers Once and Young have come to define the legacy of entire generations of warfighters. Will's here today to tell that story, how he became the one nominated to tell the story of 1st Platoon. the challenges of the deployment that became the book. Well, without further ado, my conversation with William Yeske, author of Damn the Valley. Well, welcome to Point of Impact.
Man, it is good to be here.
I'll tell you what, I really enjoyed reading your book. I can't wait to get into this. And I really do appreciate you agreeing to come on the show.
Pleasure's all mine. When you had reached out, I was totally blown away and surprised. And then seeing your background and everything and what we dealt with in the Argon Job, I knew at that moment, I was like, I have to talk to this guy. This is great. Getting that EOD perspective of things. Because that's, in reading the book, you saw that was a lot of our fight out there was the landmines.
Not just that, but, and thank you. We were in almost the same location, almost at the same time. You were in the Argon River Valley, and I think you started in the Helmand province and kind of worked your way east.
Yes.
And I was right there in the Kandahar province, just a little bit west of Kandahar in the Zaray district.
Okay.
So we probably stomped on the same dirt. But
yeah, not far at all. Matter of fact, that's the same. I'm wondering, and we can get into it in there, but just that in reading or hearing about your, basically the charge, I read about your instance to where the bomb that you would end up hitting and it being like a hoax, or another charge that was out there. We experienced a lot of that same thing out there as well. And that's what blew me away, or at least, I saw that and I was like, oh my gosh, like it sounds like the same area. It sounds like the same tactics.
Well, it really was. However, one thing I noticed in your book, and let's see, I have that up right.
Oh yeah, it's upside down, but here, I'll pull one out as well.
I'll tell you what, you did an excellent job of straddling that line between, just simply war porn, telling the gruesome details of battle and the deeper details, the human aspect of it, the putting some color to the characters within the story, the people, the men that you were working with, and describing their personalities, the partnerships with the Afghans and the Afghan National Police, the Afghan National Army, and the locals. So I tell you what, I really enjoyed it. And before we get into that, though, one of my questions was, you joined a little bit later than
Yes.
most service members. What was the decision-making process? How did you come to that decision to join the military a little bit longer in the tooth?
Yeah, that was really that was something to where it had always been in my heart to join the service. I had actually considered it at 18, right out of high school, joining up there for the Marine Corps. I had taken the ASVAB. I actually did a pretty good score on there. They were chomping at the bit. And, my parents had kind of dangled out there, hey, we'll pay for college, and stuff. And you can go forth, do that. And if you want to still join the military, if you still feel that call to serve, you almost have a leg up. You can go in as an officer and, that'll kind of be the path. Like they're predetermining that. And really, I was a little hesitant, but I was like, that sounds like a good deal. Why not? What am I going to be out of? And knowing what I know now and kind of how things work, I should have made that jump. But at the same time, things happen for a reason. And, I joined up at 26 after leaving college at one point. I never finished. I think it was 2.5 years in. And I just had a life spiral. I had some great, I had a great time. That's for sure. I mean, a lot of partying, I was involved in the lifestyle of, high speed motorsports. So racing cars with a BMW racing team, doing the pit lane, as well as some of the day-to-day and stuff over there. But really enjoyed it. A car to me is just a gigantic Lego set. And the way my brain works with that, it just kind of, I was naturally going right into there. Fast forward, to 26, and life was kind of circling the toilet. And I was like, I have to hit the reset button here. It's not that I wasn't successful in some stuff. It just, I was headed the wrong way, and I really felt it. I was just, so I kind of reevaluated, and I was like, I need to hit a reset button. Why not go and do this hard thing and stuff, reset your life, reevaluate. It's something you've always felt the call to go and do something greater than yourself. You can do it. You've already qualified on the ASVAB. What's the big deal? Went and took it again. And they're like, you can have any job out there you want. And I was like, well, put me in for a special forces contract. And that was my first attempt. Went in and then ended up in the 82nd after an injury, at that point in the career path. I know the book kind of follows it. Not being so much me, but more of what someone from the lower enlisted side deals with, how they have a career path to that point. Mm-hmm. But, there was people that were in my life that I knew had served in the military, and every single one of them was somebody that I looked up to, in one way or another. So I made the jump quite literally. That was one of the things. They're like, you got to be airborne. And it was that facing the fear of heights. I was terrified of heights always, but it was that means to an end. So, and doing hard things and going through and building, either that resistance or that, hey, you know what? Like, you have to trust the people in charge. You have to trust the people around you that they've done this. They know that path. They've got you. They're not going to do you wrong. And that was proven. Airborne School was at the end, it was a thing, but it was just that. It was like, wow, there's some element of danger and stuff, but in trusting your equipment and trusting the people around you, it's just another hurdle to get through.
I didn't feel the call to serve actually until after I joined. I had a kind of a similar path where, I was going down the wrong direction, and I joined after kind of screwing up my college time. Yeah. And military was just, was one of my better options. So I was doing it for the GI Bill and to get that work ethic and to put my life back on track. But then I accidentally caught the external values, the duty, service, honor. Anyways, did you know you wanted to go into the special operations at the outset? Go to selection. So was that later?
The pull to there was really, I kind of saw the writing on the wall. The time frame in which I joined was 2008. We had kind of been in an extended combat up to that point, or an extended portion of war. I could see it ramping up, but to the point to where you're looking at it and you're seeing, all right, do you want to be conventional, or do you want to be someone who can be in the fight wherever? And I knew that was going to be, that the fight in Afghanistan really was a soft mission fight. You have the conventional on the ground, and the stuff that we did too was very similar to almost village stability operations and stuff that you saw a little earlier. Cause we were living right there at one time it was a 28-man element, but a single platoon, right outside of one of the Afghan towns and stuff. And we were all split into these platoon sized elements working hand in hand with the Afghans. So really a lot of what we did was 12-man squads and was working by, with, and through. We worked a lot with the task force and stuff in the area. We shared a lot of intel. I know there was some ODAs, there was some 3-letter agencies and stuff working within the Arghandab as well. So, I mean, all this was hand in hand. And a lot of times what we would get, and unbeknownst at the time when I joined up, but a lot of times what we would see when we were out there was we would be out doing a lot of the legwork, and then you'd build a target package basically. And then it's like, hey, we need to sit on this compound as outer cordon, and you see them come in on the chopper and they make the hit and then they're gone. And I was like, whoa, hold on a second. We can, so, I mean, the pull there, the draw, at least on that end, was like, hey, you get kind of some of the sexier equipment, some of the better training and stuff. And I'm like, why not go and work with some of the best through all this? But it's not to downplay what conventional does as well, because a lot of throughout Afghanistan and the global war on terror, they did a lot of the same type of things. They just, mission sets were kind of shifted a little bit to where, the surgeon of, a SOF or CAG or, task force, where we had the Rangers in and out of our area quite often. It's just a different job, to where it's a little bit more of a scalpel as opposed to the hammer that the infantry can be.
Yeah, being EOD, we're all about our equipment and our gear. What do we keep in our kit? And everybody's is different. But so reading that section in the book where you talk about buying the latest Mystery Ranch or Emerald Salt backpack, and getting hemmed up by a sergeant for drilling holes for your special mount, nod mount or whatever.
Ultimate private thing to do.
But even if it was better equipment, their argument was it lacked uniformity.
Yes.
Right? And to get a better picture of where they were coming from, you gotta understand and try to get the listeners, to the audience, to understand uniformity is really important. So how in training did they take random people from all these Joes from the inner city to the inner city of Chicago and New York, and match them up with farm boys from Oklahoma and turn them into every man's a soldier? Tell me about your basic training, jump school, and definitely don't skip over the showers.
Well, that's really you just put it right there. How do you take a group, and especially within the sort of, I guess, the credo of the 82nd Airborne, they're the all-American fighting force, America's Guard of Honor. But how do you take all these varying people that are across 50 states, and they might be a city boy versus, the country boy that can shoot, and doesn't mind a bit of hard work, but there's maybe a few differences in the way of mindset and stuff. How do you get this cohesive group together? And it's, I would say, really, the two things that stand out are repetition and blunt force trauma. No, but I mean, really, that's what you go through in basic training. I knew it was a little bit different at first because you have that initial shark attack, at least back in the day, to where these guys were getting herded quite literally off these buses and screamed at, and they're causing this mass confusion to kind of rattle people. And being a little older, I'm looking around and I'm seeing, I knew that all this is meant to be the mass confusion and stuff. And you can look at the other guys' faces and see like just they're overwhelmed. There's a 240 up on the ridge, you know, and they're just shooting blanks, but it's adding to everything, and smoke grenades and, what were they using? The training grenades there. So arty sims and stuff. And guys are just this massive gaggle running down into that full on, like, all right, let's go into a physical training. And what you don't realize is as you're going through that physical training, they're breaking through mental barriers too. There was one specific instance, and I'm not really sure if it's actually in the book, and I'm sure everyone has these moments to where they can see where there was a clear break in a mental barrier. And one of them right there was in basic training. I had packed extra, and we're all holding our sea bags over our head. That was the game of the time. So everyone's holding these 50-pound plus sea bags over their head with all their stuff in it, all their gear for basic training. And they're getting yelled at and whatnot. You can't hold it above your head for forever. The thing was, after about 10, 15 minutes, I started to get to the point to where they're going around yelling at everybody. And I've done pretty good up to this point, but I got to where I went to, like, I knew I was going to black out, and I was like, I just accepted it. I was like, you know what, man, I'm not going to drop this bag. I'm just going to hold it over my head. And my vision went to a print pick, you know, just that little tiny dot. You know, I saw the stars closing in and stuff on it, and you're like, all right, here we go. You know, I hope I can fall in a way to where I'm not going to bust my face open. And then you hit this moment of clarity. You know, you push through it, and it was like almost like the world snapped into a vivid picture. And I felt like I had to hold that thing over my head forever. And it was just like, whoa, okay, something here is different, you know. And it was like facing those challenges and almost looking forward to the next one along the way, and seeing where people ran up against their own type of barrier like that and pushed through.
Mm-hmm. You said herded, and I immediately flashed to the Fort Bragg cattle cars, just getting crammed in those things to go out to the ranges.
Oh, yeah.
They're quite literally semi-truck trailers, and you just get shoved into this thing.
They weren't using those anymore by the time I made it to Bragg. They were using the white school buses. So they have started to shift towards the kinder and gentler. But I am no stranger to the cattle cars.
I also remember those old World War II barracks.
Oh, yes.
And I remember that made national news, but only after I got to spend a few lovely weeks in those accommodations.
Oh, that's amazing.
But backed up. They were. I think they were literally condemned.
Yeah, we had a kid fall through one of the flooring. We were doing a training room clearing using those buildings. So we would do something to run out there during PT and then use rubber ducks. And yeah, one of the kids fell through the floor, and that was the last time we were allowed to do that. No, you're talking. They were just so dilapidated.
I didn't do Army basic training. I started in the Navy. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that was very vividly similar was your description of taking showers. And you know, I remember in the Navy, at least we had 5 minutes to get all 80 of us through this big communal shower.
Yes.
So how did your drills get you clean?
I mean, and that was the every night. You know, I know the one mentioned in the book, that was in particular Drill Sergeant Ogle. And he, of course, you know, they yell out that toe the line, you know, and everybody runs up, and they're, you know, shower time, and you have that impossible time hack to make that. Mm-hmm. And that's just the thing after thing. So everyone is standing around there, and of course there's going to be one or two that just didn't make it, you know, so you're standing there just trying to hold a towel with one hand. And these towels, it's almost like these towels that they supply for basic training that you can get are purposely too small. You know, it's like you feel like you're it's a struggle to try to stay covered. And you've got your soap in one hand, because what you have to do is to effectively shower anyway. They just marched us through the wall of showers, and they were always turned on randomly. So in the beginning, it was all cold. And then they were like, oh, well, you guys want responsibilities. You want warm showers. And they actually picked out one of the most nervous and anxious kids. And they would kind of shark attack him. And they're like, go start the showers, and they would just be on him the whole time, screaming as he's running in there, because they gave him like another impossible time hack of 10 seconds to turn on all the showers for the rest of the bay to go through. And here's 50. Well, I think at the time it was 60. They dropped so many people in that class. We started with 80, and I think we left with 40 something. I put the numbers in the book. But to march the people through, so half of them are cold, half of them are hot. And this particular one mentioned in the book is everyone is around this, and it's, again, repetition and blunt force trauma until you start figuring out how to either cover for one another or have your stuff set up in such a way to go on a moment's notice, which you can equate to later on in your career as QRF, quick reaction force. If your gear's not set up in a specific way and it pops off, you have to be ready to jump into it. So it's really, these lessons are being built from the beginning. But this one in particular was they just hammered it into us. And yeah, that's when we go into the naked burpees, to where it's, wait a minute, hold on. What did he just, and you knew that there was, what was coming. You knew that the end state was everybody was going to be pushed to a point to where they were embarrassed. You had to face that embarrassment and then get over it. But the point being, in which he drove home at the end of the instance, was that in the battlefield and on the battlefield, there's no shame there. You're going to see, either you're going to be cuddled up, with your partner in a foxhole, nut to butt, if you will, in the way of trying to stay warm, which, man, I also did when we went into the Arkansas River Valley. That was some of the coldest. I think the clearing operation, the first 3 days, we were burning cow manure to be able to stay warm enough at night. And that smoke and the smell, and everybody is just, you get a bunch of guys crammed into a compound just to stay warm. There is no shame in that. And they were kind of breaking through those barriers that society and that you do to yourself, to where, oh, I'm embarrassed, I can't do that, or you hesitate. Break through those moments of hesitation, because you got to trust your leaders that they know what's right here. And especially in a life or death situation.
Yeah, there's nothing that brings a group of individuals together like shared embarrassment or shared misery.
Yeah.
And they're just running through all the different scenarios where, the drill sergeants it didn't matter. There was going to be something. Because they needed to find something wrong. So they found it. And it was right after something, you think, some kind of evolution, whatever it was, going through the showers, going to the range, whatever it is. And they'll find something, and it's half right face, drop.
Yeah, I laugh at that. Clint Eastwood has a movie. I can't remember which one it is, but he has that gravelly voice, and he's half right face. It just brings that memory. Oh man, I know what that means.
I had they don't call them drill sergeants in the Navy. They call them RDCs, recruit division commanders. Okay. I had this chief. He described him as, it was like a black Superman. The dude was ripped, and you could see the grin on his face when he found something that offended him in some way. Yeah. And then it was, all right, push those bunks back.
Yep. You can take the tricks out of the bag.
Push the bunks back to the wall so we have room to get sweaty, and we're going to make those windows sweat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, but it worked.
Oh, and they do too. They do actually. I think the phrase that ours would say is, "We're going to make it rain in here," and they did a few times. I know exactly what you're talking about.
The walls would be sweating from just the pure humidity in the room from our own sweat. So
but this is also why Navy EOD is one of the best, though. Honestly, out of the ones we worked with, Air Force, we had some Army, but the Navy guys were the ones that we would gravitate to, because it seems like you guys have one of the hardest schools out there for EOD class. I know I'll probably get some flack for that one, but
the truth is, I wasn't EOD in the Navy. I was a cook, and it was until I switched over to the Army.
Okay.
I went EOD. But it is true, the Navy's got the best EOD school. But it's also true that all of the branches they all go to the same school together.
Yes.
Only the difference in Navy is that they're grouped in with special operations. So they also get all those they go to jump school, they go to dive school. And if they can't pass those, then they don't even get a chance to go to EOD school. Because they're, of course, underwater.
And that does make sense, because we had some EOD guys in our airborne class that I noticed had the scuba bubble and stuff, and that was I wasn't acclimated yet to everything. I'm still trying to figure it all out, so I'm like, wait, so airborne school, I thought it was all newbies here. Why is there guys with like rank and we're getting hemmed up from roommates now? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, well, it's like different grades, right? You go to jump school, you go to dive school, and you get that bubble, the dive bubble, and then you go to EOD school, and once you earn the EOD badge, the bubble is incorporated within. It's assumed already. So I don't think many wear the dive bubble because they've got the EOD badge, the crab.
Yeah.
But so you deployed to the Argandab, and first it was Helmand area, the Helmand district. This was what time? What time of? I guess the Afghan war was this?
So we ended up, I'll have to kind of paint the picture here just because of, we were supposed to be going to Iraq, and we ended up getting orders from President Obama at the time. This was 2008, early 2009 when those orders got cut. To start pushing more troops into Afghanistan as part of a surge movement, much like they had in Iraq. And we were really the next brigade combat team that was slated to go, to deploy. And they were like, hey, we're just going to divert. You guys are going to Afghanistan instead. And we showed up really for a train and assist mission in Helmand province. What was going on there is our battalion tried to get us into Marja with the Brits. We ended up in Lashkargah. The Advan party was coming back with stories of like, man, we've already been in some firefights with the Brits. This is going to be wild. We've trained for this. This is going to be a heck of a time. But be ready, guys, because they're a month early. We get there, and by the time we had gotten there, those, the Marines and the Brits were working on shaping operations for Marja. And, our battalion commander's like, hey, we got these hungry paratroopers, and they wouldn't let us in on it. They're like, no, you guys are a bunch of cowboys. No way we want you going into Marja with us. Why don't you take the advise and assist mission up and down the highway with the Afghan police? We're like, are you okay? And so let's see, we got there in September. We were kind of held a little bit, and we were there for probably 2 months. We got into our first firefight in Helmand, which was actually good, seeing that you at least get a little taste of the experience of how that confusion within battle happens. that one actually coincided with the launch date for the book. So October 31st was the book launch date. And that was our first firefight in Helmand. That was what the whole planning was, another little historical Easter egg within everything. So 2009, October 31st, first firefight. Not too much longer after that, our battalion commander had ties with General McChrystal. And he's like, hey, I've got a bunch of hungry paratroopers ready for action. We've got them going up and down the highway. There's nothing happening out there, really. What do you got for us? Is there something that we can get into? And that's when they were setting up the Kandahar Surge for 2010. And they're like, yeah, we got a spot for you. We got somebody you can replace. And we ended up replacing 117 Stryker. And they actually got pulled out early because they had experienced losses to the fact of combat ineffective. The Arghandab, just as knowing and talking with Jaeda later on in my career and seeing like just how much we had seen out there and the different variety of techniques and bombs that we had seen, and it absolutely wild to see the variety and the amount of like the skilled level training that those bomb teams, the emplacement teams and stuff were using. In the Argonaut, far cry difference than Helmand, where Helmand you could drive along, clear every culvert, and you'd be all right. But the Arghandab, you had to take the worst path imaginable, because if you took any easy path, it was fact, you were going to get blown up. In particular, the one that was crazy and what really sucked the wind out of their sails was the double stack tank mines. Any time that they would run through in Strykers and stuff through the valley, these things would just get bigger and bigger, and they blew a Stryker in half. Literally just vaporized everybody inside. And from that point, it was game on out there. There was, you could see the pictures with Strykers with search and destroy painted on the side, and just the attitudes were extremely aggressive. And in an area to where you get aggressive on a populace like that, they're not going to be helping you out. If anything, they're going to be doing some techniques and stuff. I didn't mention them too much in the book, but like where you have kids will fly kites, or they're releasing. We had one town, Pir Pamal, there was a guy at the base of it that would release pigeons and stuff as soon as we were going out into town. There was always eyes on you, and it was just a very different environment than Helmand was.
Well, tell me, what was that environment? Describe that a little bit more. What was the mission? And I know that just an aggressive posture. There were a lot of the troops had a healthy distrust, which it was more or less warranted.
Yeah.
But tell me about the enemy. Tell me about the populace, and what were you there to do?
Well, really, a lot of it was deny enemy movement within the Kandahar region in there. So you have this belt. They're creating these like security belts, or at least trying to. Quite honestly, the more I learn about the whole thing, it's almost like we were that target out there, to where it's like, hey, we're trying to secure Kandahar proper, and you guys are going to be the line of defense through here. But really, quite honestly, is you had a lot of freedom of movement through there. You had canopy cover of the orchards. You had the mountain ranges. You had all just the different. They would hide weapons caches. You'd come across stuff that to where the bottom of a well would be dug out, and there'd be AKs, jugs of HME waiting for them. Sometimes mortar rounds that were unexploded that they could use to create something. You just find all sorts of stuff embedded with out there. And what would happen is the cold months. So we ended up going in there in December 2009 and hit a few. Our first casualty, our first KIA was December 26th. So a day after Christmas, Specialist Jason Johnston hit our first IED. And really, I don't think that was one that was created for us. That was just one that had been in place. someone else had used that compound before as an observation point, and it was booby trapped, you know. And the second when we went in there, we started doing site exploitation, and we're seeing MRE wrappers and stuff like that. And it was, you know, within the first 30 seconds. And it's like, whoa, something's wrong here. We need to back off. And as they were coming out to, hey, spin it up and get out of here, that's when the charge went off. I can get into that in a minute, but the moving into the Argon Dab in the winter, you know, I'd said it was some of that clearing operation in that initial part. We ended up going in as a company element, but then we left second platoon behind at what ended up becoming Cop Johnston to act as a QRF and as that backfill. So we moved forward with, I was in first platoon and third platoon and basically cleared out a radish field. You know, it was, hey, what's central to this valley? All right, well, this is where we're going to be. This is a good plot where I can, you know, it fits all the parameters of what the commander needed as far as creating an HLZ and everything else. And he wanted to be among the populace. And thus began Cop Ware, which, you know, just from the very start of it, it was, you can see in the pictures, the Heskos that they put up to kind of create this little mini city inside of here, was that there's nothing in the Heskos. There was no security for, I mean, at least a month. You know, these things are, from what people, your listeners don't understand what a Hesco barrier is. It's, you know, you have a cage with burlap surrounding it and you fill it in with dirt. And it ends up being about a 6-foot dirt wall in between that can be used to stop, you know, an RPG, rounds, whatever they throw at you, basically. I mean, you could stack them on top of each other, create more of a barrier. But with that, we were just essentially putting up a privacy fence in an area to where they could just come by and, you know, light it up with an AK. And we would actually be hampered from being able to respond to that, you know. And you're using Humvees and whatever that we could get out there, which you really didn't want to drive through there. So that alone was pretty dangerous once, you know, we went in and took it by force, dismounted. And then it was, hey, you're going to hold this for a week while we gather everything to get in there. But somewhere along the line, resupply was hampered. So it got to the point to where guys were eating radishes out of the ground. You know?
But they were
so
good.
They were at that point, you know, when you're that hungry, they're delicious. Really everything in that area. The Argon Dab is a really big, if you look at the varying environment and stuff, but just the soil and the populace out there is mainly farmers. And if you look at a lot of the stuff now, I actually, just from the social media campaign and stuff, I had, there's an Afghan that reached out to me. That's like, he sent me a video from the Charba area, which was at one of the far regions. We cleared Charba at one point too. And he's like, hey, I saw your whatever. And I'm driving through Charba today. And I was like, so I have Afghans following the Damn the Valley book campaign on social media as well. Not only ones that are still there, but ones that were there when we were there, but they were kids when we were there, which has been really, it's been cool to see. It's been rewarding in the way of, you don't get to hear that side from the Afghans. So through this and through the reach and stuff starting to grow throughout it, we got to hear from some of the kids, you know, and they were vetted in a way of, someone reached out, they saw a posting of Pierre Pamal, and they were like, hey, that's my hometown. I'm in New York City now, but I remember you guys. And here I am like, all right, you know, it's social media, like, sure. So I kind of was like, you know, let me call him out. It was like, oh, wow, that's wild. Where would you, do you have any description of, you know, I want to actually see if maybe we can whittle down who you were. And he was able to pinpoint and describe in detail where we would meet these kids mid patrol, on our lock patrols. And I was like, wow, like and hearing from him that when we had entered the valley, you know, everyone was kind of, they could tell there was a difference, but they didn't know just our posturing and stuff too. We tried to go out of our way to be like, there would be a lot of them to where we wouldn't wear our sunglasses, or we would change out the lenses to be clear lenses, because if you look at someone from a culture that you're essentially moving through an area, it's almost like you're moving through biblical times. You look like a robot, or what is that? Have you ever seen Terminator? It kind of looks like, what is this coming in here? Here's this superhuman Americans coming in here, because if you look at the muscle structure of someone who's lived out in Afghanistan versus, well-fed, works out in the U.S. military, there's you could tell the difference. So what we looked to them, and so it mattered. And this particular kid and stuff he was able to convey that there was a different feeling towards us. And by the time we ended up leaving the valley, the people were working hand in hand with us. They were sharing intel. Unfortunately, some of it did lead to the enemy retaliating on that, to where, at one point they started laying out tripwires and stuff in the fields where kids would play. And that right there is, where you really start dialing in and seeing just how evil some of these people can be. And I have no other way other than to describe it as that, like someone who does that to another human being, especially a child, with that type of intent. Man. Oof.
Well, that's it, what you're describing is the same thing that Commander Scott Mann wrote about, and just had him on the show about his book, Rooftop Leadership.
Yes.
And it was, you show up and you don't, yeah. The locals, they've been impressed by the Taliban, Al Qaeda, and Russians and British, and people just come and go. War is fought, and they live their lives, and they have a distrust of everybody. And you got to find a way to break through that distrust. So you get up on the rooftop and you fight. And eventually, like he found, once they realized that you were there to help and you weren't going anywhere, then they start firing back too. They start helping out. They start giving that intel. I remember you talked about the kids, and I don't think many Americans really realize that it's a different culture.
Yes, completely.
And they grew up a different way. And it's, me against my brother, me and my brother versus my cousin, me and my brother, my cousin against my neighbor. And it's this clique, tribe, clan,
community,
village mentality.
Yep.
And to come in there as strangers, and like you said, you're big, you're geared up. But remember the kids, man, they were sharpshooters with those slingshots.
Yes, they were.
But you come with soccer balls and candy, and I remember they would appreciate it, but there was a hierarchy even among the kids.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And the bigger, older kids, they would literally beat up the smaller kids.
Yeah. That was and some of it brutal, to where you'd be like, oh my God, like it made you, after the first few times, there was one of the guys had seen, this little girl, she maybe was like 5 years old, hit upside the head by a 12-year-old, just wailed her with a rock, a large size, like took this kid down. And it was like, after seeing that and then realizing and then being like, okay, you have to like either break that side of it or show them that you're the protector on that end, and try to instill some of that. because it's really a dog eat dog world in some of these portions. Third world countries, it's just different. That culture is different.
Mm-hmm. You saw an ugly side of that culture.
Very. Yeah. Yeah. Especially towards the female, sex. And that's one of the things that's just horrifying throughout the whole, I would say really the Afghanistan tragedy behind that is seeing them turning back the clocks once again, and things like the Doha Agreement, which is like, you knew that they weren't going to follow anything in there. Women are going to be allowed in schools and this and that. And it's like, they're just telling you what you want to hear right now. And as soon as you're gone, it's going to go right back. If you look into how, what the Taliban promotes and everything, they're not a legitimate government organization. They are someone who wants to keep people ignorant. And there's someone that wants to really keep their foot on the throat of somebody. And that right there is, that's the reason why, really the U.S. military and that's in our ethos is to protect.
And one of the terrible ironies of our intervention in Afghanistan was that the Taliban, they expressly, forbade drug use, drug cultivation, all of that, and that human trafficking.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah,
And
there was an element to there. Yeah.
so when they were gone, well, of course, drugs became prevalent throughout the country. And in fact, when they started fighting, they started using that to fund their war. But
Yes.
you mentioned that other ugly side in the book about the human trafficking.
Bachabazi. Yeah, that's one of the and you're seeing things here, in America and stuff. And it's I know I started watching that movie, Sound of Freedom there, and it's just, to me, things with kids really hits me hard. I have two of my own, and to instill these things of, and it's kind of cool that they're bigger kids because I've kind of been able to teach them in the way of like, you've been given a gift. Don't bully people. You're the one who's standing up. You're the one who shows the way. You're going to be looked at as a leader alone just because you're, my daughter's 8 years old and she's already up to here on me, and I'm not, she's almost 5 foot tall. And, but to instill those leadership things in them and to be like, you are a protector. You are somebody who can stand up for what's right because that's been given to you. But to see these people taken advantage of, especially these children, in an area. And this is something to where, that we were told, so Bachabazi, for people that don't know, I guess you can translate it into boy play, because they go out and they seek after these young children, and they're discarded by 18, and they use them within celebrations to dance among the men, to dress up like women. They dress them all up and they have them perform dances and, essentially what's a cross-dressing thing. And they get abused during all of this. We had a commander in Helmand province, actually, who had his own little chai boy, and he offered him to our platoon sergeant, and that was we had express orders from the U.S. Army at that time and the U.S. government that, hey, you're to be culturally respectful. I think this is right around the time when that Green Beret actually stood up to that one and was pulled. It became a big deal because he got pulled out of country for standing up to someone who was trafficking. They were making lewd comments about this chai boy, and he wouldn't stand for it. He stood up for what was morally right, and and was really betrayed by the U.S. government, by the Army, and by his chain of command through the whole thing. I don't know the entire situation, but in seeing it myself and being like, hey, we are leaving here. We are not staying around this. But it's like, why didn't we maybe take that kid with us? I don't know, but it's things that you see like that, the ugly side of things and the taking advantage of and the corruption, and someone who is like uses their strength instead of to do good, but to do harm to others. That's the epitome of what we should be standing against.
After these messages, we'll be right back. I'd like to thank the sponsor of this episode, Extraordinary Delights, EODfudge.com. Extraordinary Delights is a disabled veteran, family-owned small business making handcrafted fudge and other sweet treats for the chocolate-loving patriots just like you. Go to EODfudge.com and check out some of our delicious flavors like triple threat chocolate with or without walnuts, mint dark chocolate, strawberry and creamy white chocolate, or my personal favorite, American Pick-Me-Up, an all-American version of tiramisu. While you're there, go to the apparel store and check out our awesome t-shirts, polos, and the baddest tactical apron on the market. You see me wear on the TikTok show, Aaron Hale's Cook Without Looking. So, right now, go over to EODfudge.com and pick out some fudge, other sweet treats for that patriot in your life with a sweet tooth. That's EODfudge.com. EODfudge.com. And now, back to the show. There's a common, philosophy in the United States, and many don't know any better, but evil does exist in the world. And it isn't that other cultures maybe are oppressed and don't know any better. So if we just give them money and take away some of that oppression, some cultures are literally better and some are worse. And there are some aspects of other cultures that are wrong. And there's a moral code that should be ubiquitous throughout humanity, but it's not that way. So it is a tough it's a tough line to walk, to go there with a moral code and a set of rules of engagement that sometimes may come a contradiction.
Yeah.
So tell me more about partnerships, because I remember when I was there in 2011, partnership. It was drilled into our heads. We are going to work in conjunction with the ANA, Afghan National Army, and the ANP, Afghan National Police, and we're going to help them learn to protect themselves. So we need to partner with them. That was a struggle all on its own.
Oh, yeah, you're not wrong there. I mean, there's just the green on blue incidents alone. They had a pretty major one, that particular unit, the follow-on deployment, to where, 2 kids were killed, one out of the tower and then the sergeant on the guard. That was in 2012. That was the mission afterwards, to where they actually got sent back out there. Not this same region, but I mean, literally you could see the mountains in the distance. It wasn't that far off of like where they had been previously. And I just talking with some of the guys during the interviews and everything and hearing about some of the things about that deployment as well. I kind of asked them, I'm like, what were your thoughts when they told you guys you were going right back to the same region? And they, that struggle right there alone must have been just massive getting on the plane.
Tell me about there was a scenario you described in the book where you're in convoy and a U.S. truck rear-ended an ANP.
Yes. That was actually Afghan commandos. So that was they were in a Hilux. We were coming back from this mission it just went forever. It was a joint mission with the Brits. And I want to say it was I put the unit in there. I'm so unfamiliar with British command hierarchy and stuff. And I keep forgetting but it was Royal Marines and stuff that we were doing the mission with, along with, I mean, a slew of, this convoy was huge. It was like 60 vehicles or something like that. So it was our company, a bunch of Afghan commandos, Afghan police, and we're coming back from this thing, and everybody's been up forever. And it was 72 hours at this point for me. And we're coming back, and, you know, I nodded off at the wheel. You know, everybody in the truck, just one by one, they start going down and stuff. And even the TC next to me, he's like, "Hey man, you going to be all right?" Like I'm just nodding off, and I'm like, "It's cool. I got this. I've never fallen asleep at the wheel. We'll be all right. You know, I'll just pop a window." But after 72 hours, your body just starts telling you, like, it just shuts down. You know, I had no choice in the matter. And it was like I woke up at the last second, right before we impacted the truck in front of us. And it wouldn't matter. I mean, I had 2 feet in, locked them up, and hit that Hilux to where it was like Afghan bowling pins. These guys went just flying. And of course, you know, I mean, my first reaction was like, holy crap, like we're in an up armored Humvee. We just crumpled the whole back end of this truck that was full of people. I probably just killed somebody, if not, you know, majorly hurt someone. And as we're going through the assessment of the situation, and everybody was just woken up, and the gunner has a print on his head from where the 50 cal cracked him, and things start going crazy. Things start getting heated, you know, and the Afghan, their particular commander of that group right there, starts lining them up, and they all start racking weapons pointed at our truck. You know, in our truck, we've got the 50 pointed back down, and the gunner, his legs start shaking with the adrenaline and everything. And he's like, "Hey, what are we doing here? What are we doing?" You know, to the truck TC, which was one of the squad leaders, and he's radioing in what happened. And the Afghan commander comes over, he draws his pistol. And the one thing that they use in Afghanistan, like people, a rifle means nothing to them, but you pull out a pistol, they use pistols for executions. And this guy just comes over and he wraps his pistol on the side window of the Humvee. And I have this like, oh man, and he motions for me to get out, you know, and Sergeant Ackers, which is the TC, looks over me and he's like, "Do not under any circumstances get out of this freaking vehicle." And, you know, I've got the truck at this point now. I'm like, I'm aiming up the situation. I'm like, I've already dropped this into 4 high, you know, and I'm waiting, because I'm like, am I going to go through these Afghans? Because that's the quickest way to take out the amount. And we're starting to, you know, it just got to the point where it was super heated. And I was able to see in doing the interviews and stuff, and hearing from the other guys, because we didn't even know until much later who had diffused the whole situation. But it was one of our Afghan interpreters that kind of saved the day later on. His name was Gucci. He came in and knew exactly, like, you know, what stance to take on how to be pious enough to be like, "We're extremely sorry. You know, he's going to be severely reprimanded," and make it, you know, play the dog and pony in a way to where it was acceptable enough to them to where it wasn't going to escalate. And once everything was said and done, thankfully, there was one guy with a broken leg, and that was it. Everything else was just bumps and scrapes. I still felt absolutely horrible about it. It never happened again. But what it could have turned into could have been something much worse, you know. And that was the Mexican standoff. You know, I was even asked, like, why, right?
Thank goodness you had that terp. In fact, you had, that was the commando's terp, or was that yours?
So that was,
you had, before that, there was another guy, yes, who was more like the FNG, barely speak his own language.
And that's the reason for how like we go about getting the interpreter system and stuff, like, or how they kind of work it out. But there's so many different dialects and so many different languages that are based in Afghanistan. So like where he might be from the northern region, You know, and of course they're going to bring these guys down because they're like, well, we don't want somebody operating as an interpreter in the same area to where they live, because that's like,
Right.
they're just going to snatch their family up because everybody knows everybody. And then they're going to start getting inside information, or this guy's going to be compromised because that's just how they work.
Mm-hmm. I can just imagine the interpreter. He's going to be whipped. He'll be demoted. Also, Commander, I've heard you're very well endowed.
And this is the same, but I mean, like, this is the group that we had to work with, to where, I had mentioned this too, is like the compound we were staying in, there was two people at the gate that got in a heated discussion about something. And one of them mentioned a lewd comment about the other's sister, and he killed the guy. He shot him right in the face, and these are two gate guards. I couldn't ever see that happening in the US military, but for them, like in their culture and everything, it was just, hey, he made a slur against my sister and everything else. And it was just accepted by them. Well, going to play stupid games. And I was like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me.
That was another thing you just mentioned about the Terps not being assigned to, their home area. But that's similar to the ANA, where they, just like us, we come from all different parts of the country, and our duty stations are nowhere near our home. And it's not because, our families being put in danger. It's just, part of the nature of the military. It's also why we change duty stations so frequently. But the ANA, they get assigned to wherever they're needed. Their units are needed around the country. It's the police, they stay in their own general region, and that can be problematic, not just for their own families, but there's a flip side, an ugly side to that, because they've got cousins, brothers that are working for the Taliban. Maybe they themselves are working for the, I think you said you sometimes knew when somebody is dirty.
So when we were in the Arghandab, that's where we experienced more of that. There was clearly up and down the highway, but we didn't have too many interactions to where it was more, we were training them in Helmand. So when you move to the Arghandab, that's where we were doing a lot of the side-by-side patrols and everything. So first platoon, once we had experienced that loss on December 26th, it was probably about another month and a half or so before we kind of rotated to what became Combat Outpost Johnston, and second platoon rotated into Cop Ware. So that was now second and third platoon was out of Ware, and we were working with the Afghan police chief that was out of Cop Johnston. And that guy was, he was one of the good ones. He had actually trained with the Afghan commandos, was trained up by our own special forces units and everything. And he had, instead of commissioning into the commando school, he dropped his commission for the commandos, and he went and worked for the Afghan police, just because he knew how corrupt they were, and he wanted to be one of the ones that could influence change. When we first got there, he had kind of a hand-picked crew that we could trust, and they were really good guys. But as time went on, and as the casualties and stuff stacked up, and the situation out there just became more and more dangerous to be there, the guys sort of scattered, and the replacements and the people that rotated in were not handpicked people from him. And they were kind of sent down, and you could tell that he had an issue with them too. But you started to kind of notice things to where, you might have a patrol leaving the wire, and you notice one of them that's back there gets on his cell phone, so we would start purposely needing to send a patrol one way. And then once we were out of, you couldn't see us from the towers in Johnston anymore, switch direction. and to make it look like we were headed one way, but then you hit the orchards and then you would skirt along and go to the actual objective. And it was weird to have to do, but not only did we have that, but then you also had ones to where, they would either be nervous to go on patrol because they knew something was going to happen. So dealing with a population or a partnership force that's corrupt or has been compromised, that was just another hurdle in the whole thing. And you could put the interpreters on the ICOM channels and stuff, which is like the same handheld, like it would be handheld Motorola's that the enemy would use to kind of work. And we could intercept those transmissions, but you're just putting an interpreter on it. We didn't have anything like SADE assets or, the listening post guys, which that would have actually changed quite a bit. I know I got to talk with a few different units throughout this, just in some of the knowledge that I got to procure in working, with the special operations side later on and knowing different people and stuff and hearing these questions like, why didn't you guys have these assets and stuff? And it was interesting to try to pull apart and try to come to terms with like, were these not known? Were they too new at that time? Were we just spread too thin? So we did. I mean, we had task force and JSOC on the other side of the mountain from us, and in and out of the area quite frequently.
And that reminds me of also talking about the police, how dirty the Taliban were playing, even with hiding IEDs. And you mentioned something about hiding what would you call that? P-bed, police-borne IED. There's by this time you'd gotten made some connections with the locals. You were getting intel.
Yep. I know which one you're talking about. Now, it took me a second. Just like, when you have so many different instances, I think that intel actually had come in through one of the contractors that had been working on the buildup at Cop Ware. Mm-hmm. And our commander had kind of pushed out, hey, we've gotten some intel saying there's going to be a vehicle IED, keep on the lookout, maybe push out your defensive perimeter. And the particular incident, this particular incident, there was multiple vehicle-borne IEDs. I mean, the front cover picture there is actually a picture from the battlefield of one that 2nd Platoon experienced, to where, I mean, it was 1,000 pounds of HME, 1,000 pounds plus, shoved into a truck and then driven as close as they could get it to the ECP, so the entry control point for Cop Brunkhorst. And I mean, they leveled that place. The pictures and stuff are in the book. That was just so crazy of an incident. I was in the talk at the time, and we're, like 2 clicks away, and the overpressure, there's a mushroom cloud, but I mean, the overpressure from that thing, the door to the talk was just a piece of wooden plywood attached to a spring that's to hold it closed. And that door slapped to where the door flew open when the pressure concussive wave hit, from that far away. And I jump up, and run to the door and open it. And I just see this mushroom cloud coming up, and I'm just like, I knew the direction it was coming from. And
was that the incident with the sergeant, the firefighter?
Yes. Yeah. Brian Erickson. And he was actually a specialist at the time, but that was someone who had been involved. He found himself before the military, his aspiration was to be a firefighter and to be, one of New York's finest, FDNY. And this was prior September 11th. So, I mean, he was right over the river as a firefighter in Jersey, but he was part of the people that they had commandeered buses filled with first responders and stuff. And they were bringing them across the river into New York to support the Twin Towers and the September 11th, the September 11th attacks. And to hear that from him, that he first experienced that And then here he finds himself years later, digging people out of the rubble. The exact same type of operations and stuff that they were scrambling through on 9/11 and stuff. And here he is again, dealing with a building collapsed on people and, hearing screams from under the ground of his buddies. And thankfully, there was some people that were really banged up really bad in there, but we didn't lose anybody. At least on the U.S. side, there was some Afghan children that ended up being killed in that particular one. And it's just the fact that they lived in the backside of the compound that these guys were staying in at the time.
And that was that almost turned into a friendly fire situation, didn't it?
Yep. Just the, something like that happens. And, you have your quick reaction force running from 3rd Platoon, because they were coming from, at this point, 2nd Platoon had established Cap Brunkhorst. So 3rd Platoon was out on patrol. They were actually out moving towards the town of Diakache, which is where the location of Cap Brunkhorst was. And they go into basically a QRF type situation, and they're moving to help or moving to intercept. They don't really know what's happening because the radio comms were down. And the guys are up because they're expecting a counterattack. They're expecting this to be a complex ambush or a complex attack, just to follow through. And they just see movement coming from the orchards, and they start lighting up everything down the road, machine guns and everything. And they very nearly took out some guys from 3rd Platoon that were just moving to help. But that's just fog of war. They're posting up stuff and your adrenaline's high, and you see people moving up tactically on you. You can't really blame them for it, but yeah, it almost ended up in a friendly fire incident.
It was a very kinetic deployment for you guys. There were plenty of examples throughout the book of these kind of situations where you're not quite certain the environment you're going to be in, or you're going to walk through, or what's going to approach the ECP, or somewhere along the wire at any given moment. And
the crazy part with all that is that my book was just 1st Platoon's view. I know there was that incident with 2nd Platoon and then the 3rd Platoon with Brunkhorst to where it's mentioned, but I tried to gloss over it in order to leave the full picture of the story for the other platoons, just because of the amount of things that we experienced and the amount of instances that happened out there. The other guys even said they didn't kind of believe it at first. And I told them, I'm like, there's no way to tell the whole company's story in one book. It needs to be an anthology, because this is, and once they read it, they all agreed. They were just like, man, we see what you're talking about. And even the publisher told me at one point, they're like, hey, you need to stop putting more into this, like more stories, because like you're at book length. Like we can't stop sending material.
Did, in hindsight, do you think Bravo Company's efforts over there were a net positive?
I think so, in the way of any time you don't know the true, and we talked a little bit about this before, you don't know the true ripple effect of things. Anytime you have something like this and you have, essentially good men standing up against evil, we experienced a lot of losses, but honestly, like, I can't see where it could have been done any other way. Sure, there could have been different things that were done during, but really that type of fight was something to where I think that there was no other way around it to see our loyalty to what happened there, other than, we paid that price in other people's blood. But I think that the Afghans started to realize that, they are here to help. This isn't just another group that comes in and doesn't care and then leaves afterwards and rips out and staying in their static location in their base. They're actually trying to provide security. They're trying to One of the things that we had said is literally we would post up security patrols at night because people in the villages started getting night letters, and they would be pulled out at night and beaten up by people. So they were always on edge. You never knew if your family was next, who was going to get strung up by a tree or who was going to have their limbs hacked off. And to be able to provide a good night's sleep for them meant everything. I mean, just even in the smallest sense. So to give them that taste of what we take for granted in this country, that little taste of freedom, and be like, look, things can be better. You need to stick up for yourself. You need to do something about this. And they started to realize, from us talking about some of the things that we would get from social, that I'm getting now from the social media side of Afghans reaching out, whether they were either refugees or people that are saying thank you, or the far reach within the other guys in the military and stuff. We all faced a hard thing, but when I'm getting, journal entries from Kiowa pilots that flew overhead of us, or I'm getting in touch with, one of the Air Force EOD techs or the JTAC that jumps out of nowhere and says, man, my life was really affected by this deployment, but thank you for telling these stories. And thank you for showing me there's a better way forward here. Cause there's a bunch of them, some of the guys are doing good, but there's a bunch of them too that are struggling through some stuff, and they're struggling through life. Mm-hmm. But to be able to go back and say, I did this hard thing, and this next day, it's really not that bad. It's about perspective. If I can make it through that, I can make it through anything. And to go back and reevaluate, it's a hell of a thing to be part of.
Yeah. I totally know what you're saying there. For people, it's a really hard life, the military, especially in a time of war on the battlefield, and what we go through. It's sometimes unspeakable. However, with those that come back with the right perspective, it just turns down the volume on everyday problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are veterans out there that are creating incredible businesses and living exemplary lives. And when a car breaks down, or somebody doesn't put the cover letter on the TSP report, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah. It gets blown out of proportion.
You had a little bit of difficulty, like we all do, from the top also. Did you have challenges with changing ROE, or maybe it was the fact that the United States as a nation kind of has a collective bipolar disorder, or ADD, where we're trying to earn trust. And this was something I talked about with Colonel Mann. As Green Berets, they are in there to get the locals to trust the United States, except they would get their legs cut out from under them when we just decide that we're going to leave.
Yeah.
One, did you experience anything like that while you were there? And two, what do you think? I guess I'll wait for this answer and ask that follow-up.
Oh no, I could wrap it all in, but we definitely did. You look at some of the things again in talking with others about this particular deployment, and saying, hearing the things like, wow, what medal, I had one guy in particular, man, what medals did you guys get from this? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we all just got blanket ARCOMs. There was, I guess you could say, the perfect storm. You had stuff such as our battalion commander and command sergeant major that had gone with us through train up, and, we trusted them. They ended up getting removed from command, mid-deployment. And right around that same time period, the ISAF commander, General Stanley McChrystal, he got replaced as well. That was the Rolling Stones article came out around that time, to where confidence within the higher command echelons was, it was not good. So within the battalion, once they were removed, you had the new incoming battalion commanders also now facing that distrust from the men, that distrust from the command structure as well, because they're like, hey, does brigade have our backs? And that hit hard. For a lot of guys, it made them feel that we were out there just flapping, on our own, and it was all up to us. But on the flip side of that, I think that actually bonded kind of this stuff of us going through that together and understanding that, you had said to Scott Mann before, he's got that new book coming out. No one is coming to save you. And that's really the kind of mentality that we took, is like, hey, we are on our own out here. We have to work our way through this. We have eyes on the situation. Sure, we can send up the reports. Who knows where that goes? But it's as that, I hate to coin the term, but as that boots on the ground person, you can only stay within your lane. You only have so much effect in there. But it's something to where the guys have kind of kept along the way. So those ties and stuff, I can call any single one of them. Matter of fact, craziest thing, probably why I'm a little bit out of it today, is I got a call late last night. I had called a few people. I was on a longer car drive, and I had made some calls. Hey, just checking back in with you. How you doing? And stuff. And about 11 o'clock, guy calls back, right before I'm going to bed, and he's like, I'm glad you called, man. My life is in shambles. And I go to the wife. I'm like, hey, look, I'm sorry. I'm going to be a while. And it was really good to reconnect with him and stuff, but to be that support system and to be there for each other. And it's something that the guys have pushed forward through this, and it's pushed forward through, even with Charlie Company and that other book. I don't know if we were talking about that once we started recording and stuff before, but I talked about it in my book. The guys across the river from me with Charlie Company, we would hear firefights every other day from that area, and we would want to respond. We'd just be like, look, we want to go over there and help them. We know those guys are getting hemmed up. They're platoon size element. We're hearing hour-long firefights. What are we doing over here walking through minefields? That's where the battle is. But in him coming out and having one of his guys reach out to me and say, hey, there's Andrew Bragg is writing a book called The Devil's Playground about the Arghandab region here. Is there something that you can, I see you have your book coming up. Is there something you could do to help him out? And through that ripple effect of helping each other out. And now his book is coming out. And there's additional books that he's helped coach others. And this ripple effect of people bonding together and really just continuing what we had within the service, within that support network, and creating these pockets through sharing these stories. And really it's rebuilding that resilience, and it's rebuilding, that togetherness to where we're better together. That's one of the things that I keep pushing on, is that we are better together. That's what we did in the military, is worked as a team, and we worked effectively and best as a team. Why aren't we continuing to do that? And why do we have a tendency to self-isolate as veterans? You need to be out there, whether it's in your community or with your other guys, because that's when you're best.
You're absolutely right about being better together and having that support and giving the support. The second part of the question was more about, well, how do you think we did all together, the entire 20-year effort? And I believe the founding fathers, all the way back 1700s, got it right. But they knew that the military needed civilians running it from the top. But I also think our congressmen, all the way up to our president, probably wouldn't hurt them to go through basic training. Maybe embed like journalists for a couple weeks in a battlefield. Just saying.
Just
But
to see, yeah, some of that other world scope.
how do you feel we did, and what do you think? What are your thoughts on how we left?
Oh, I mean, how we left was absolutely atrocious. For there's just so much that went wrong in that to begin with. I mean, I don't think that we should have left in the first place. There was a lot of other things that they could have done, but at the same time, too, is I don't know if they really had an ultimate plan out. They didn't have that plan, like where one of the things that they would say in the civil affairs schoolhouse all the time, you're working your way out of a job. I don't think we actually had that in Afghanistan on the strategic end. But, here I was, I was a much lower on the totem pole. So I don't know. I don't know the full scope of everything. I know in my personal experience and what I hear from the other guys and stuff is that it's pretty upsetting. A lot of them look at it and say, man, like, what was all of it for? I think ultimately we don't know that purpose. And I don't think we're either meant to know or maybe we'll never know. And that's okay, because I know that in my own personal life, that conflict or that end has shaped how I work through things. It's given me a great friend base that's really turned into almost like a second family. That's almost my primary family, really. And just so much has come through it. That's been good. Bad exists out there, and I don't know. Really, I'm not at that strategic level to make that call, but I know that on that end, it does kind of rub me wrong in seeing that we pretty much abandoned a group of people that there's good people in Afghanistan. They're still trying to offer up a resistance to what's happening over there, and it's atrocious. It's tough to see a place to where we lost so many good guys and so many lives were affected of really good people, to just say, well, we're going to wash our hands and we're done with that. We're going to turn an eye to everything else. That's a blind eye to everything else that's happening there. Because, they're right back into it. They're right back into things like we saw before, women getting stoned, by not stoned as in stone what someone would think of in America. Like, someone they don't like someone and they can literally call them out, and the village will come out with rocks and stone this person, hit them with stones until they are dead. And people are like, that's crazy. And it's like, no, I've seen it.
Yeah, that used to be, and maybe is now, it used to be a soccer, football halftime show, was burying some offender up to the head in the middle of a soccer field in Afghanistan and throwing rocks at until they were dead.
Or do you think maybe that goes along the way of like the Mongolian? They used to do that too. They would put someone out there and they would be basically playing polo with horses, and and occasionally they would use the skulls of freaking people.
Yeah, we still, quote unquote, occupy. We're still in Germany, Japan, Italy, England, Greece. We still have troops in South Korea. All over the world, we have tens of thousands of troops.
Yeah,
in these locations today. So why was it so important to run with our tails between our legs, leaving billions of dollars of equipment behind for 2,500 troops who are still on the ground in Afghanistan? I can't explain it.
Yeah, I can't either.
Oh, well, I really do appreciate you sharing your time today, sharing the stories in this book. And one more time, let's see if I got it right this time.
I can't.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I gotta hold the book up the right way. Thank goodness you sent it to me in electronic form too, or uh, I wouldn't have been able to read it. The braille bumps on this thing are a little shallow. Uh, but one final question: Why? Why did you write the book?
That was something to where, I knew that we had that other book come out. I had always really had in the back of my head that I needed to write something down. And quite honestly, when that other book was coming and I reached out and interviewed with and talked with the journalist Ben Kessling there, a Bravo company, about my end of what I had seen and everything. I got this feeling, and as we got closer to the release date and stuff, there was more chatter from the guys that were like, hey, he wasn't there. And there was a lot of animosity towards the whole thing. So I actually called up Mr. Kessling and I was like, hey, I'm hearing stuff from this end. Is there any way I could review it? In his process, he didn't want it reviewed before it was out there. And I don't know everything in there and stuff, but, when it came out, or I kind of asked him, what do you think? You've heard my end of the story. Is this something that I should put down? The guys are kind of saying that, one of us should have something out there. And I don't feel like, I don't want it to be like piggybacking off of yours. But at the same time, I kind of took that responsibility of writing it and I shirked it. When I found out he was writing one, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders and I was like, oh, good. Someone else can write this. I don't have to go down this path. And as we got closer to his release date and hearing everything from the guys, I kind of realized I had made the wrong decision. But in talking with Ben, he actually encouraged me and he said, no, I don't feel like you're trying to ride the coattails of this thing or anything. Like, your story absolutely deserves merit. Like, I've heard, we talked at length. Mm-hmm. And he encouraged me to put it down. And from there, I mean, just between the connections I made from writing it, some of the chapters were written with tears coming down my face, but really the unintentional effects of feeling the need to create a historical record there and to go above and beyond for these guys became something that became really rewarding for me. And it broke down that those mental barriers, and it helped to where I never thought I was affected by this stuff. I was always like, I can talk about these instances without any problem. But what had happened was I never truly processed everything. So slowing down enough to write the book became a process that was part of healing for me. And even some of the instances that are in the book, I have trouble sometimes with some of them because my mind's at ease with them and I don't dwell on it anymore. I don't think about those instances. And it's sort of like, all right, you've processed this information and it's no longer affecting you. It's no longer affecting your psyche or your anxiety in that way in the background. You can move on to better things now. And I really have pushed for other guys to share their stories. I mean, I even opened up something on the website, the damnthevalleybook.com, to where it's called The Wall of Stories. And I have, there's journal entries from Kiowa pilots that were offering support from us. And there's EOD guys. There's one of them, the chapter is called, he writes a blog and he had something that came out. It was called The Worst Day of My Life. And I guess he was going through Barnes and Noble looking for another military book. And he saw, he didn't know anything about it. And he saw Damn the Valley. And he's like, I wonder, it had an 82nd logo on the spine. He's like, I wonder what this is. And he pulled it out. And it was like, he said it was like he met his worst fears right there in the bookstore. As he saw the unit on the front and he opened it up and there was the instance with Johnston, and he had been one of the EOD guys on that mission. And he was like, I broke down right there, and I took it home, and through reading it, kind of had his perspective shifted during the whole thing too. And I mean, feel free to get on there and look at what he has to say about it. It's definitely a different, I encourage anybody who has a story to tell to go out there, just because I really felt some really good therapeutic effects from that. And I will just working through it and processing and going through, slowing it down to where your mind goes through that process and goes through that information and kind of pulls apart that fog of war that might sit there and cause animosity or anger or maybe aggression and stuff in someone's life that shows up as PTSD symptoms. Try writing something down. Just try journaling. Start to delve down those pathways, because it might be more therapeutic than you think. It has been for me.
Well, again, I appreciate your time and the book and telling these stories.
No, Aaron, thank you so much for having me on, man.
Brother, where can people who are interested get in contact with you, find the book? Where do they go from here?
So really the main hub, you can go to damnthevalleybook.com. I have the signed copies available, but I also have links to Amazon, and all of the social media stuff. There's been over a year of pictures that the guys sent in to help support, the book tour, the book social media campaign and stuff. So, I mean, really it became something a little bit bigger, for everybody, to where those guys are having all those pictures. I run all of them through Photoshop and stuff and kind of take that old digital camera era stuff and enhance it to the fact to where it looks, you really get a good feel of everything that you're seeing in the book. And then to go even further, actually, just really quick, is the flag from the front cover, along with a whole bunch of artifacts from those stories in the book, are actually held at the Airborne and Special Operations Museum down in Fayetteville, North Carolina. We reached out after the cover picture was, decided by the guys, like this really exemplifies the feeling in the Valley. And someone reached out to me, and they're like, it was Erickson actually. And he's like, Bill, I have that flag. Like, I recovered it, and I've been hesitant to talk to you about it, but do you think it's something that we can use here? And now that's in the DoD historical archives. That's, along with a whole bunch of other stuff that was in those stories, that there's actual IED incident stuff. The PMAG that saved Sergeant Lee's life is there. There's uniforms that were there that, you can actually hold a piece of history now. And this is something that those guys can take their kids and their grandkids and, for perpetuity. And that is now something that's part of the historical archives. And it's been so rewarding to bring that together and organize that stuff for those guys. It really has been. And thank you for having me on to be able to share these stories as well, and to get that out there. I'm really encouraging others to do the same.
Well, the story needs to be told. And the story is, one more time here.
There we go. Damn the Valley.
I got to turn around the right way this time. Damnthevalleybook.com. You can go get your copy now. Well, thanks again, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.